We'll call to order the City Council Transportation, Energy and Utilities Committee meeting at 4:02. And I would entertain a motion on the agenda.
I move it as presented.
Second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Say aye. Aye. We have the agenda. Next item on our agenda is adoption of minutes from
The adoption of those minutes.
second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Say aye. Aye. So we have adopted the minutes, and the next on our agenda is for the forum. Is there anybody from the public who would wish to?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Rick Sharp from Burlington Segways and Electric Bikes. For the last 2 years, we've run smartphone activated e-bikes on the waterfront at College Street, and been very successful with that. But we are very concerned about what's happening with bird bikes. We've heard complaints from everybody about where they're left and everything in trees or on top of the roofs and those things. They don't control their bikes very well. And that's apparently because they only have 2 guys trying to take care of 200 bikes. Therefore, they had to reduce their fleet this last summer and reduce ridership. Basically, Bird isn't doing a good service here. They're not paying attention to what they're doing. They're mismanaging their bikes. We know that, and we believe that you should not continue the contract on to next year. However, if you decide to continue on with the contract with their bikes being left all over the place rather than in racks, then we would request that you at least protect our summer tourist business by keeping Bird bikes off of the waterfront. Last year, they were down there with 6, 8 bikes every day wrapped around Echo. 100 feet from our bikes. They're in direct competition with us. They were, as I understood it, that they were going to be doing a point-to-point system, and they would not be competing for the summer tourist market. They're obviously ignoring that. That's happened with every bike share program that has come into town because that's where the money is. So, but we would like you to make sure that you can protect a local group like this, trying to establish a bike share system. If you would like to expand to 50 bikes next year with bikes located at Oak Ridge Park, College Street, Penny Lane, North Beach, and Penny Park. Based upon the demand that we're seeing over these 2 years of experience, we believe there's a really strong demand for these kind of things at North Beach, where people will go up there, park the bike, and go to the beach, and then get back on the bike and come back downtown. So, but we need protection if you're going to do something like that, because we can't have 200 e-bikes flooding into our area in the parks or at College Street. So we would ask that if you're going to continue the contract, that you at least make sure that their bikes are not to be stationed on the waterfront, that they have to be stationed east of Battery Street, and any bikes that are left on the waterfront overnight need to be repositioned to neighborhoods rather than left down on the bike path in competition with our bikes. We believe that they cost us $10,000 this last year or more due to the competition with our bikes. So please protect the local bike shop and put those things into the agreement if you're going to continue it. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thanks, Rick. Is there anyone else who wants to address the two this evening online, perhaps?
We do not have anyone online.
Let's then begin our deliberative agenda. The first item on our deliberative agenda is the third bike share contract work session. Is there any public portion for
we could summarize and say that in conversation with other regional partners and CATMA, there is interest in continuing the existing bike share vendor. We are staff supportive of having a discussion with the committee, as we heard from the last meeting, interest to discuss what the conditions would be and whether there's any amendments to the contract. The timeline, just to reiterate, is that we have a 90-day notice to cancel, and that the renewal date is in June. Therefore, we need a decision by March into our direction. That said, if we aren't going to renew the contract, then we'd want as early a heads up as possible, as any procurement would take a significant amount of time to have something up and running by next summer season.
Any community questions or comments? I have a question.
Let's see, we have the dates.
They're in the contract, is that?
Yes, we detailed them, I think, in an email, at least internally. So we can certainly get that today. Yes.
Because just so we know whether or not it's a February 2nd or March 2nd or.
Right.
So it looks like this was executed on the 23rd and the 27th, between the 23rd and the 27th of June. And so then
The 90 days backing up from that period.
So 23rd gets us to March 23rd.
So we would need to have a decision on March 23rd, or would we have to conclude any?
Yeah, if we want to go a new direction, we want to go sooner. But our TUC meeting in March would be likely the 25th. So likely we'd either need to meet earlier in March or decide in February.
so unless there is a different effective date, then it's 90 days from the end of the term, right?
Yeah.
So I mean they sort of link together. So sort of spinning through here. I'm not your lawyer, of course.
Let's just
Try to be helpful.
my question was more to figure out if it's in your. Unless we want to start something.
Yep.
Sessions to be, so we can talk about aspects of the contract. Want to talk about, then we want to enter into an executive session. So we can all get it. That is the role of the committee. I would entertain a motion on that.
Magic words from an attorney would be helpful.
I had said, do you want me to read the motion aloud?
Yes,
And then
if you
just-
could.
And I'll just endure, and then I will just adopt it.
All right, so the first motion by, I guess, Councillor Berkman, second by Will C, to find that premature general public knowledge of contract negotiations and discussions with legal counsel would clearly place the city at a substantial disadvantage because the city risks disclosing confidential information about negotiating strategies, attorney communications info.
I move that motion.
I would second.
Motion number 2. Oh, yeah. Sorry, it's late in the afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Yeah,
Sure,
Maybe
thanks.
be in my office.
So is there any discussion on? All those in favor?
I
Okay. Now motion. That based on the finding of substantial disadvantage, the committee enter into executive session to discuss the contract negotiations involving the CATMA regional bird bike share program under the provisions of 1 BSA 313 A1A and F to include the committee, the public works director, DPW engineer Julia Ursaki, GPW public information manager Robert Goulding, and legal counsel.
I would move that.
Second. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
And so we are.
Recording stopped.
We have an executive session, shuttle fair policy review for 20 minutes. That 40 and 40 gets us past it.
I don't know that.
I'm just, if we can trim both of those a little bit. Okay, excellent. So with that in mind.
So, I mean, I'm actually happy that we're in this nice intimate room. We heard some of the comments last night from council about the whole, especially now that we've sort of shown the longer schedule. Did you take a look at the presentation at all? Did you have a chance to? Okay, well, we talked about a lot of stuff. We talked about the work that we've done. We talked about the bits that we're able to slice off. Like, we think there's risks, but there's rationale for maybe removing like 29 million from the wastewater proposal. I haven't put that back into the model to then show what the rate impact would be. And some of what I'm working on is for January 2nd, actually giving you guys more of a memo with tables and all of this. But in hearing the comments, I think it was Joan and maybe Becca and others, about the concern, it seems like we're to the point where people support the need for the project. They support the outcome, having working wastewater treatment plants that get phosphorus out and that are able to meet our growth concerns. And I would even dare say that, like, if push came to shove, if I couldn't come up with other alternatives, you might be compelled to put the number that I'm recommending on the ballot. But I think people are expressing that they're concerned because it's so important, and this is what you said a long time ago, of the number being too big and it getting voted down. And so I'm trying to figure out, and this is where I'm trying to figure out with the council, I think for staff to have a level of comfort of only going for a portion of it. So say the main plant portion and tertiary now, which will just roughly throw out like 130, 123 million plus. That's just for the wastewater part, right? You could slice off some of the things. You could push out these plant collection system and consolidation a couple of years. But I'm trying to figure out a way that the resolution that allows us to move forward with the bond vote also has a statement of the council acknowledging and approving the capital plan, or acknowledging that the council directs DPW to come back no later than FY27 with a proposal for the remainder of the plan, whereas the plan is this long thing. Because we don't want to get, and I know you can't fully beholden another council, but I want there to be this recognition that the first phase and what we're doing in the first phase, it is dumb to do what we're going to do to main plant if we don't end up later on voting to do what we need to do for East Plant. So that's what I'm wrestling with, is what does that language looks like? How is there a way of even getting it into the bond vote that gets the voter to agree that they're voting for this amount? But
They could authorize the sale of the bonds, but you don't have to sell the bonds right away.
Yeah, no, that's.
yeah,
we've
on that.
Not true.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm definitely gonna do that, but they're worried that if I put a number out that's too big, that's 170 or 180 versus something that's 130, that everybody's just gonna go, oh, no, we can't do this.
This isn't, I mean, if you think about it as there being stages, you've got a big plan.
Yes,
You're going to do them in stages anyway, right?
yes,
Therefore, laying out, this would be in a resolution, the big plan, right, of all the different component parts and making sure it's very clear in all the language how they are linked and they are necessary pieces to each other. And then, recognizing both affordability and practicality meaning, well, we're not doing the whole thing at once anyway. You can't, I mean, physically can't do that. Therefore, the first phase one,
yeah, whatever, yeah.
you call it, so that it's part of a plan, but it's phase one is to do this, and this is what you're asking for. And it could be, I think, to even write on the bond authorization that this is bonding for phase one of this bigger plan that you've done. And that would make lots of sense in terms of the number. It would make sense in terms of the presentation to the people so that they know that it is not, you know, like what Tiki had said, you know, yeah, that, oh, you told me it was gonna be all over. So that's my sort of
Okay.
thought, and it makes, I think that it's logical what we would do. You know, it's the logical way to do that. And then, of course, that's also consistent with not letting bonds, not putting out to bid
Yeah.
bonds before you need them or when the times are coming. And so all of that little aspect of it in terms of the timing and not committing yourself, I think, to not doing something that you would then need to do quickly, you know, so giving some flexibility in the understandings that are in the resolution for the subsequent phases, I think would be important.
And for Eric, like, I certainly, our preference from staff's perspective, so that we don't have to go through any more drama 2 years from now, 3 years from now, is because it's one big project to go get the authorization and then to get people to believe us that we're only gonna issue with these small amounts. But frankly, that may get lost in translation, and we don't want to end up on March whatever with a vote that is not in our favor, and then we're like stuck.
Scrambling.
So we're trying to figure out how to present it in bite-sized chunks, but again, to Jean's point, preserve. Like, I'm not gonna have arguments in 2027 or whatever year that I have to come back. And I'm going to try to lay that out in the memo as to what the schedule would be of coming back. But there are a lot of benefits of that. More will be clear. We may know at that point how much grant funding we may get on the first part. I will say there may be some strategy in not making the first number so tight, like maybe that number plus a little bit extra on the hope that somehow magically when 2027 comes around, we've pulled down enough grant funding that I don't even have to come back to you all for a bond vote. But if I do, and it's for the things that I said I was gonna come, or for people who, if you're not here, like, do you think though, if you were a counselor, right, and you didn't make that previous vote, but I produced this resolution that would give a future counselor enough backing to be like, yes, this was part of the plan, we're not gonna change history anymore?
News stories, which you have been having, but that keep walking down the path so that it's explaining the resolution, the actual ballot language itself, both the long form and the short form. If you have all of those things, and you've got relatively decent minutes in you know, for city council, I think that if I was inclined to be fair as
Yes.
opposed to political, you want to be political, all bets are off. It's, you know,
No, I'm not gonna hear that.
exactly. Well, no, I mean, you can't, there's no accounting for people who are just gonna do what they're gonna do, and they don't care what you say, they don't care what the lawyers say, they don't care anything, they're just gonna go ahead and do it. I see it all the time. I'm really, if I wasn't so experienced, I'd be sick of it.
Is there any merit in having the actual item that goes to the voters stagger, so that you have authority in 2027 to sell, so that you have authority to sell this much now, you have authority to sell this much in
It
2027?
would still be the big amount though.
But it's not, you're not saying like, I mean, somebody has to add it up.
I think if we were in a different political climate, the answer would be maybe, yes, maybe, but I think.
I have some views on this. I mean, I'm trying to like let the committee speak first, and so.
You go.
I'm not saying, I'm gonna riff on what you're saying, I think, but, because the difference between what's political and what's like responsible can be blurred in certain spaces. And, do you have some comments or questions around this?
I guess I'm a little bit confused about the potential plan to stagger borrowing. So, because if because what would happen in the scenario that in 2027 we only we get the Holy Grail grant somehow, and now we no longer go anymore. We less. I'm all for having that extra money on hand, but in terms of a future, in terms of voting and what other counselors might do that, how does that work with this plan to stagger?
You mean like us sort of, well, first of all, in 2027, I'm not in the language, I'm not gonna say how much I need in 2027. I'm going to refer to the plan, which is a scope of work, which in a memo may say what we think the cost is right now. But I'm gonna be coming to an FY 27 for the bond authority to construct the remainder of the scope. And so if we have gotten grant funding, then I would have to explain all of that then. I think one of the things that Joan said, and I'm gonna run this to ground with DEC, but the problem with the pollution grant funding, that is our biggest hope in the grand scheme of funding. Unfortunately, like transportation grants and things like that, there's no grant thing where I just is like, I have a project, give me the grant funding. The only way for me to get major amounts of grant funding is to run it through the SRF. And in order to go through the SRF, I have to have the bonding authority to first sort of say, I need to borrow this money. And then as part of the borrowing process, they say, oh, by the way, here's a huge grant. And so it's not going to work necessarily how I think people want it to work and how it works for other projects. Like ultimately, I'm still probably going to have to come and get some amount of bonding authority. But the things that would change what that FY 27, if you will, nugget would be if we got so much grant funding for the first stage, that then I have remaining bonding authority that I don't need to go for the rest. It could be if we decide, which I hope we still do, to change the charter to give us annual borrowing authority. That could be part of my financing plan. So there's enough things that could change, which is the only reason why I'm willing to like have this conversation and move off of our firm position of like, no, we need all the money now. It also, I think, plays into the bigger conversation of like, we are always doing infrastructure projects. There's not some magic, you give us money and we're done forever. Because, and I haven't talked about it a lot, but even this nugget that I'm talking about, that's not everything. And I've always in the back of my head had a stage 3 nugget. And so like really trying to lay this out as part of this approach. So it is clear as the writing in the memo or the minutes or the whatever, like we're going to be in this for a while and we're going to give you things in snippets of information. And it's going to be with that, we're going to have better numbers. Like my numbers are decent now, but they're going to be better in 2 years for the further out stuff.
Yeah,
So,
that makes sense.
I don't know if there's a magical number though. Like if you in your head think that the ratepayers are going to be like, 125 is the right number versus 150 versus 130. Like
So maybe that's something for me to do that.
I guess I would just say that I think that making sure you have that flexibility over time is important. And I would, I don't know. I would also say that it's troubling that we won't know what future counselors will think when they look at this.
Mhm.
It's just a fact. So it also worries me a little bit, but I also want this to pass.
And I want to say one thing to that because somebody reminded me of this, that say we build main plant to be able to accept East Plant because that's the plan. If some crazy set of counselors is like, no, we don't want to turn East Plant into a pump station, you're going to be sitting with a giant main plant with probably a tank that we don't even have filled because we've built the capacity to do this thing. So I hope there's enough compelling empirical, like in your face information of why that would be the dumbest thing in the world to not just keep going with the plan. It won't just be me saying that, it'll be like a picture of a tank that we don't have online because we don't have all the flow coming. So that was another piece that helped me over the course of the day get to a slightly different place than maybe I was.
So I think it's and having not seen the council discussion yet.
But it was pretty limited considering how late it was.
Okay, but I think ultimately, in answer to your question, how much is too much? It's not just the water bond.
Oh, yeah.
It's education.
Yep.
It's municipal revenue increases. It's
Yes.
our ability to deliver on what we told the voters last town meeting day that we're gonna find savings and
Yes.
efficiencies,
Mhm.
meaning trying to find those ways to still deliver all the city services that are expected. Maybe without having the same size of, the same sort of hierarchy in our employment structures and things. And so I think that that's the thing that drives us. Like when they look at town meeting day ballot questions, I mean, they'll look and they'll say, you add all these things up, I can't afford to live here anymore. Some of them are up, they're not within your sort of area of responsibility and certainly education policy, but we've
Yeah.
heard that there's a lot of work can be done in this area. Because it's fundamentally broken and we cannot do what we do right now. We don't have enough students to support the amount of spending and enough taxpayers to support the amount of spending with the rates of inflation on healthcare and the cost of everything else. So we're going to do something there. Similarly, we have modern gut we've heard about. It's going to take a while to implement. And so if we stage this plan, the expectation that we're going to be coming back and continue to, I like the idea of like laying the whole thing out and saying 2025, we're doing X,
Yep.
We're funding X or bonding for X and
We're getting the bonding authority.
getting the bonding
Yes.
authority for X. And then we can start that work, but continuing to sort of, communicate that there's this intention. So it's in the sort of, public mindset that it's out there. I think that that's important to have that continuity with future councils. But also it'll give us time to sort of wrangle in some of these other expenses, whether it's on the education side or on modern gov initiatives. And so it'll help to manage sort of the increase to the ratepayers and taxpayers that, speaks to the affordability question, which is central to all of this. So I like the idea of us just saying this, this is like back to something Gene says is trust but verify. And so this would be using trust but verify to say, yeah, we're giving you authority now, and the voter, you don't have to say, well, make these other things, the rate of increase for these other things lower.
Mhm.
We just have to demonstrate it, and then they will,
Yes.
with a little bit of good communication and nudging, support future investments in water infrastructure if we're not off the rails on education spending and other municipal tax increases for things that the voters may not think.
You named the one risk that concerns me in this chess match is, are we going to move the needle enough on those things? I hope we are, we have to,
Yeah,
but they are outside of my control. I am responsible for the water resources, and so there is a benefit to just grab all the money from the cash tube that I can now, and if things fall apart later, I mean, we would have that conversation anyway, because I'd be coming back to you asking to issue the bonds. But that piece concerns me a little bit, that if somehow 2 years from now, things aren't rosier, is it gonna be even harder then? Now, frankly, that number that we're gonna go for 2 years from now should be a much smaller number, so it's hopefully more easily sell, but we just sort of named the one like, oh, that would be the one thing that we're risking is people are worried now, but like, could they be more worried in 2 years?
I think the answer is yes, and it's one of those risks. I don't think there's a magic number. I think what there is you have a number. It is the magic number, right? It was like 200 million, 190. No, I know. That's exactly the point. There was a number. People, I believe, can follow and will follow as the diligent work to lower that number, to make it more realistic, to do the best that we can, because we care not only about good water, good lake, but we care about the ability for people to afford here. And if that's a communication there, and you are not just saying it, but you're doing it, you build the intangible capital, right? That is that goodwill on the balance sheet that you get to carry forward on it. It is sort of like a reduction in the in the amount. And so then the question is, to me, it is the number, the magic number is the one that is the smallest reasonable and responsible number. And I, just like we throw in contingencies all the time, they're built in. You don't just, okay, this is what we're going to bid, and we'll worry about if it runs over 10%. No, we throw in a 10%. So building in a reasonable and fair contingency that is reflective of that capital that we're trying to build with people, I think is really the way to go. And so part of it is just the realism, the not overly conservative approach to making the ask. In other words, not being too too scared that you're not going to be able to get enough for later and all the other little things. I think that's the way to go. And as long as you are not taking this out of the big context, I think you will at least be able to have a fundamental good shot at winning. And let's be really clear. At the end of the day, what you have been and what you continue to need to be pushing is that everybody who lives and passes through Burlington needs to be able to drink clean water, because as a human being, this is an absolute necessity. And we get our water from the lake, and so you cannot foul the lake and all of the iterations that go with that, because at the end of the day, you got nothing. I don't care where you go. You might, like if you're living on the Aral Sea, right? That dried out piece of salt, right? You got a problem because they fucked it up. So how's that for the public to hear? Once again, my big fat mouth. So anyway, that would be the way that I would push it.
And then I would just add to that is, I think that I've always noticed that if you can explain exactly, if you can demonstrate the need and articulate it, Burlington voters have been very generous with infrastructure spending.
Yes, yes,
So,
our previous votes were like 92% of
Right.
88, and
Yeah.
it was smaller.
Sure. But I do think that bigger context of like how much stuff costs, all the stuff, is something that impacts this question and how many things. So
Well, and it also gives us a little bit more time. I didn't touch upon the other part of our presentation, which is kind of started the conversation with you all about affordability program and what our affordability program looks like and what is the freaking benchmark for affordability. And even since the last time we met and we did deeper dives, the entire water resources world in the United States is struggling with this. There's no, other than the EPA, which says you can spend up to 4.5% of median household income, a measure by which we don't have a problem in Burlington. Like, that's the only accepted benchmark, and it doesn't deal with all of the things that you just said. So we have a lot more work as a community whether it's the tax fairness committee or whatever, to figure out what is that amount. We had a great conversation with Seattle Public Utilities, because they're the ones that have that indirect assistance program for renters. It was a good conversation. But we learned that their benchmark for affordability is 70% of the state's median household income. Which is about 50% of the Seattle area median household income, if you were at that level. And I haven't compared how much more that is to the federal poverty limit, the 200% of federal poverty limit. But I gotta believe it's getting into that next tier of upper lower income or lower middle income folks that right now, none of our affordability programs, none of our federal state assistance things help. And those are the people that we can keep helping the low income folks, and maybe we should. We can have that debate about whether they're already getting enough assistance and we actually need to shift our focus to the next tier of people. But the next turn of the wheel of the affordability program needs to be extremely well justified to be putting the costs on somebody else. So this model also gives us more time to do some of that work. So.
And that might be a good place for it.
Yep, that's fine.
You have everything you need for.
Yeah, I just wanted to this is didn't sleep much last night and woke up this morning and was like, okay, how are we? I know all of you didn't sleep well.
Or was it helpful? You got what you need?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of numbers to crunch and just sort of lay it all out and how would it really work? And are we talking, back-to-back years or 2-year intervals, things like that? I know that giving some space in between is going to be helpful. I want to make sure that we can do it safely, not put ourselves in a situation where things are blowing up and we don't have the ability to be responsive. But
yeah.
Thank you for trying to do that work. So with that, we have he's come to talk to us about
Another fine question.
nice rainbow suspended.
I'll be careful.
5:14. What's your hard stop?
I'm supposed to be at City Hall at 5:30. So if I leave it at 5, if we stop at 5:20, if we stop at 5:25, then I'll be late.
With that new speed limit, are you gonna be able to make it in town?
There's no enforcement.
Okay.
There's no enforcement. There's other cars.
Chapin and I talked earlier, and I'll make an abbreviated sort of version of that in respect of Jean's time constraint. One of the things that Chapin and I wanted you all to kind of is, I don't get enough for everybody, but if you can share it.
And I don't know if that council that I don't know if you're going to provide this anymore.
I uploaded a version online. I'll put it up. I'll bring it up here now.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll look at this one.
Excellent. And so what we have here is a variety of options that take a look at the fiscal year 26 assessment that we talked about the last time I was here. And what the difference is between the options is whether Burlington continues to pay for fare-free service on the Route 11, or previously called the College Street Shuttle, and whether or not a special assessment ends up passing. And so taking up the special assessment first, we've only had one city, South Burlington, vote on the special assessment so far. They voted in affirmative. We're going to need 8 other municipalities to vote in an affirmative. If any of them were to say no, then we would be looking at option 3 or 4, which would have the bottom line dollar amounts there. You can see the impact there. And so option 3 would be if the special assessment were to fail, but there would still be paying for the fare-free service. And option 4 is if the special assessment were to fail and there would be no fare-free service. And so that makes option 4 the most economical, and the option 1 being the most expensive is the one if it has both items in there. So one of the things that Chapin I think thought would be important for the discussion here is, since we've talked before about whether that route should continue to be fare free or not, is to focus there, because obviously the special assessment is sort of out of our control. So how that ends up playing, I'm not sure if we want to spend too much time on that, but I'm happy to answer questions on sort of the methodology. One of the things that I do want to say about the special assessment is that not only do we have to have all of the towns say yes, but we would also need to incur the expenses. The three expenses that are attached to that special assessment are a driver buyout. So if we have a good legislative session, we won't need to have a driver buyout, and so then we won't bill you for that. Another thing is for assessment reform. One of the things that's been positive is that since issuing the special assessment, CCRPC has come on board and said that they would like to help us with assessment reform. So we're not going to have to go out and get a consultant. We're going to be able to partner with them. And so those costs are going to be much lower than we anticipated. So I think that it's fair to say that the 170,000 is likely to be lower than what's projected there. Getting to the fare-free route, there were some items that Chapin and I had discussed. One of which is that GMT is going to have to be looking at its fare practices. Our targets for fares is coming in a bit lower than we anticipated, at about 8% of revenue instead of the 10% target that was set. Part of that is because we're studying that to make sure that we understand, because we've just now got our first 6 months worth of data since returning to fares, and we'll have a better understanding of what those reasons are. One of the things that we're aware of is that the participation rate with our discounts is, I think, higher than we expected, with about half of the rides that we're providing for somebody who has that discount eligibility. And so that's something that we just wanted to acknowledge here. And so that would be roughly speaking, under our current fare structure, the folks that are using the shelter, or not the shelter, the shuttle, are paying, about half of them are paying the $1 rate instead of the $2 rate. And on other transit, so that would be, just to give you an idea, if there was a charge there, that about half the folks would be, not paying. I would say that would probably be even higher on that route, because that route does serve the Howard Center's San Remo clinic. And so I would think that, probably a significant more than 50% would be on the discounted rate for that. And so, they talk about economics being the dismal science. I think that, what we're all facing across all of our areas, the dismal science of how to do as much as we've always done with less. And we are certainly sensitive that you're our most important funding partner. You're second only to V-Trans with the overall dollar amount, and the other municipalities. I mean, you're paying almost 3 times as much as South Burlington, which is the next highest. And that's just because that's where the bulk of our service is happening in your area. And so we want to be able to work with you all to make your situation as less difficult as possible.
Could I ask that perhaps you work with Chapin and anybody else, like the assessor or the city, the CEO, whatever, to put tax increase numbers on these numbers. So instead of it being a percentage, or not in addition to the percentage, in addition to the dollar amount, what will the increase in the tax rate be as a result of each one? That would be, it's just going right to the conversation that we had, so that we know if it's going to be 3 cents, 1 cent, half a cent.
Happy to do that.
That would be helpful.
I have some questions if it's question time. Is it appropriate, Chair?
Yes, it is appropriate.
Okay, thanks. One question I have about the route, I think it's Route 11, regarding San Remo Drive.
Yes.
You were saying, so is that a net loss in terms of revenue for us?
By us giving GMT or?
Yeah, sorry, us, yes,
Yeah.
GMT.
So yes and no. I suspect that if we were collecting fares, that we may collect an overall dollar amount more than 90,000. However, your assessment money is local match, and fare money is not local match. And so that's why we have a big incentive to have these. And so I can tell you, you know, my finance person is telling me to say, no, we need to continue fare free because we want that 90,000 local match. You know, that's our perspective. But, you know, we want to be flexible.
One thing that's coming up for me is that, you know, and this has come up in other meetings and I've brought it up myself, which is, you know, that the Howard Center, I believe it's the Howard Center, is operating the methadone clinic at San Remo Drive, which is really not super accessible without this route, particularly. You know, just a quick look at the 990s. GMT has like an operating budget of 28 million or so, and Howard Center has an operating budget of like 132 million. So I really think that if we're gonna subsidize this route in this way, that Howard Center should be brought to the table as a partner to perhaps offer microtransit for patients that need to receive methadone, because that clinic doesn't actually need to be there. As far as I'm concerned, it should be downtown where a lot of the other services are, which has been the argument for many organizations and the citing of things like our future OPC or the downtown public health project. So I'm just curious, what conversations are you having or would you have with Howard Center to see what type of partner they want to be at the table to make sure that patients have access to this service?
So one of the things that I think is clear that GMT has to change is the fact that right now we don't have relationships, you know, like that with the Howard Center. We have built our funding model that was established in '73 on getting the money from you all, with the assumption that you all would then be collecting from, and you know, the various parties. But I think that the example that you're using is exactly why this doesn't particularly make sense. And I think that what GMT needs to do moving forward is doing what the rural transit providers do, which is just not looking at the municipality, but looking at the major employers and getting local match from agreements there. I can tell you that's going to be a hard sell, because these, you know, folks are accustomed to essentially getting the service without, you know, contributions. But perhaps, you know, and I don't want this to sound like it's threatening, but you know, the next few years, there's going to be service reductions that I think some of these employers and providers are not going to be very happy with.
Right.
And if they want to see change, they're going to need to be able to start, you know, putting money forth. Right. I will say that the number 11 was one of the routes that was under consideration for elimination. With the some of the modifications that we're going to make, we're going to end up shortening that route. It won't go all the way to the airport, but it will continue to serve San Remo. When you look at that route, the bulk of it is between the downtown transit center and the University Mall, and so that's actually super productive for us. So that will be retained. The next year.
And that's sort of why I mean, the UMall routes are obviously very well used, and that's sort of why I'm I guess suggesting that you go back and you think about how do we provide micro transit from the UMall to San Remo, so that there's a van that Howard Center or GMT operates together that just goes back and forth on request, so that folks can get to the clinic. Otherwise, the clinic will either A, get cut off if for budgetary reasons that route has to go, which would be a disaster for the clinic and for the patients. And B, you know, they just won't keep having that sort of undocumented subsidy. I'm not against having access to the methadone clinic. I'm very pro access to the methadone clinic, but unfortunately the methadone clinic is in a weird place. And that is not in our control. What is in our control, or your control, is whether or not the public continues to subsidize a route that may or may not be significantly underperforming it. And so there needs to be some sort of alternative to getting folks to and from the U Mall and San Remo in a more cost-effective, efficient way.
We're sort of running, at the beginning of the meeting, Evan, we had a hard stop at 5:30, and I think the line of sort of comment and questions that you have is an important one. So I'm wondering about the best way to continue to have these.
I said what I needed to say. I also don't think I said last time I don't think the College Street shuttle should be free. I'll say it again. I have nothing else to say on that.
So, Gene on his way out the door whispered to me that he thinks TDM, is directly related to what we're talking about here. Yeah. So, maybe there's a way to incorporate this into the larger discussion.
Absolutely, and always happy to come back whenever you meet.
Yeah, if you would like to have more time, I know you've gotten sort of short shrifted the last couple of meetings. If we put you at the top of our agenda next month, if that is something that you need.
I'm flexible, and so please don't worry about me just for that.
But no, we do worry about you. GMT is an important.
Appreciate it.
An important component in our strategies here. So
and not to leave the public out, but if it also makes sense for me to meet with folks individually, happy to do that as well too.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thanks, Clayton.
Thank you. So you'll try to better articulate the tax impacts and.
Absolutely, I'll pass that feedback on to Chapin, and look forward to talking about the fair stuff when we get that data for you.
Yeah, I would also, when we come back, I want to talk about this news about the airport being cut off in the 11, this new updated plan.
It would, the one would be picking it up.
It's the one.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Which is, I guess it's public. Haven't really discussed it publicly, but that's the plan.
Thank you.
Mark,
Yes.
I am sorry I was late. 4 o'clock is really like hit or miss.
No, I
think you said that last
You
time.
did say that, and
Yeah.
we understood that.
I often have these like end of day meetings and stuff, but I did just want to say, I know you have a hard stop. I'm happy.
We're at the hard stop. So
What?
We're at the hard stop.
I know. I just
Yeah.
want to ask, I guess, did you take any formal action on item 1 with the bird bike contract?
No, we did not. We just.
Okay, because I just want to ask a question. So I emailed after the meeting, the last meeting I had to miss because I was ill. I watched your meeting and I sent an email about my concerns with a couple items that I thought should be reflected in the contract, and I sent it to the person from CATMA, and I never heard back, and I don't know if it was like not the appropriate person to email, or should I have sent that to somebody else, but I didn't want to break quorum, so I didn't send it to the group.
What I can do is talk with you outside of this meeting and convey to you those things that we talked about. We can see if your concerns were incorporated into the things that we discussed.
Tonight, you did?
No, we can see it. I am not sure. So.
Okay.
So I don't want to talk about executive session content or things we talked about in executive session.
Yeah,
outside.
understandable. I just wanted to make sure because I sent it to the CATMA person, I never heard back,
So
so.
let's you and I, let's talk about that and I will
Okay.
know or not, we raise those tonight.
All right, thanks a lot.
Okay, cool. Okay, we're going to, because we're at time, I'm gonna skip the director's report, council items. Our next meeting will be on the normal time, which would be the 4th Tuesday in January,
That's correct. That would be the 28th.
5:30 p.m. That works for everybody? Should? Yep. Okay.
You mean we don't need 6 Took meetings between now and then, Mark?
Well, so far we don't. If we do, we'll figure out a shoehorn something in, but it's not the intention right now. And if that works for everybody, then with no further business before us, I'll adjourn us at 5:33. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.